In the last week, the Nervos network token, the common knowledge bytes token CKB, more than doubled. Let's have a look at how much longer this rally can potentially last. Let's try to find the drivers. Let's also look at tokenomics, so where CKB might go long term. Because here's what's impressive. Ethereum went pretty much nowhere in the last week. It even lost 0.5%, while Nervos is on its merry way up. It had been quite a roller coaster though. We have seen 3 pump and dumps in the past, and those were crashes of more than 70% each time. Now this is not the first video on Nervos. I published one 222 days ago. The video performed above average. So an average video is indicated here in gray. In blue we see the Nervos video, and that was when the price was still below 1 cent. It more than doubled since then. Now there's the CKB Explorer, and unfortunately we don't see a lot of growth in the usage of the blockchain. So this is the transaction count over time. It hovers at around 20k. The thing that does see growth though is the adoption by the mining community. So Nervos network is a proof of work blockchain. Most of the newly issued tokens go to the miners, and as more miners adopt the protocol, the difficulty goes up. And this is in general good, because you might be aware of what happened with Ethereum once it moved from proof of work to proof of stake. Once you lose the support by the miners, things don't necessarily turn out that well. So this is ETH relative to Bitcoin, an underperformance of more than 50% since the move from proof of work to proof of stake. And so it seems like a lot of those miners actually keep on holding their tokens. I know this chart looks a bit messy, but bear with me. This looks at the number of tokens that are held for a specific time period. So we can deselect the shorter time frames. We can look at the tokens that have been held at least for 3 years. Then we add the tokens that have been held at least 1 year. And we add the tokens that have been held at least for 6 months. And so we can see there is a pretty constant fraction of supply that gets actively traded. It's maybe in the 20 to 30% range. And the rest is simply held over time. Now the good thing about Nervos is that it's a very active project. We still see development happening on GitHub. So this is the place where programmers submit their code changes, and there had been an update just 1 hour ago. So that's for the test tool, another update for the debugger, another update in the documentation, etc. We see a lot of updates regularly happening. This is what we want to see. Now it looks like those pump and dumps in the price get slightly weaker over time. But actually, when we look at this in terms of market cap, the peaks are rising, as in there's more and more capital in CKB over time. The reason why the price didn't see new highs with each pump is because of tokenomics. Because the supply of CKB increases over time, they're similar to Bitcoin, a halving every 4 years. So the newly issued supply gets cut in half. At least that's for the majority of the tokens. So that's the tokens that get issued to the miners. But there's a second layer of issuance, and that's linear, 1 billion per year. So the miners will get less and less, but the second kind of issuance, which also goes to the Nervos DAO depositors and to the Nervos treasury, that continues until infinity. Now the reason for this additional layer of issuance is that storing the state doesn't become prohibitively expensive. So technically blockchains grow in size over time because we have to store every single state of every smart contract, and that gets problematic for new entrants, right? It's not really worth it to store that ever increasing state. And to reward that storage, we've got this additional layer that turns CKB into an ever inflationary token. There is no hard cap on the supply. Nervos had a lot of investors, but most of those tokens have already unlocked. And so we're probably not going to see a dump from the team or from those early backers. They've probably already exited their position. There's also a burning mechanism, but that burning is much, much slower than the issuance, so it doesn't really matter that much. And so let's have a look at relative valuations, right? We want to see outperformance over, for example, Bitcoin, because buying CKB is obviously more risky, it's more volatile. Do we see that long-term outperformance? What we've got over here is the CKB price divided by the Bitcoin price. And of course, we have our pump and dumps. The pumps are 350%. The dumps are potentially, in the worst case, almost 90%. And currently, we are yet again in one of those pumps. We have seen outperformance over the long term, including that pump. And this is pretty impressive. given that the circulating supply grew that much, and given that early investors got all of those unlocks. Unfortunately, the centralized exchanges have their hands into the token quite strongly. All of the trading pretty much happens on Binance. And that's true for the perpetual futures. That's also true for the spot market. And so there is the real chance of manipulation. That being said, I would actually not be surprised to see a new high, to see actually an all-time high here, because inflation went down a lot. Let's have a look at how much it currently is. So we are currently over here on this chart. We see 8.4 billion tokens being issued. That's over the course of 4 years. So that's 2.1 billion. Adding to that, we've got the 1.3 billion, which gets issued for securing the state. So that's 3.4 billion. And the current circulating supply is 44.9 billion. So this gives us currently an annual inflation rate of 7.6%. So if it's not the centralized exchanges that are going to push this down, maybe this rally can last for a bit longer this time. Still, this is of course a very volatile token. So one approach could be to use a trailing stop loss, right? As the price rises, adjusting the stop loss. So in case we do see a dump, that we can then exit very, very quickly. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish videos on Nervos regularly, also on other altcoins, of course. Feel free to also give this a like in case you learned something. In case you've got Telegram, then feel free to join us. The link is down below. Feel free to also check out Premium. This is where I share what kind of tokens I buy and sell. So the link is thebitcoinstrategy.com. There's also a video explaining more details. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Cheers.